What makes David Benavidez unsettling on film is not only the pace, but the order hidden inside that pace. He looks like a man flooding the ring with force, yet his best rounds are built on sequence, placement, and timing that are far more deliberate than they appear at full speed. At distance, the attack reads as raw aggression. Up close, the details show a fighter solving geometry first and punishment second. Benavidez usually claims position before he hunts a dramatic finish, and that choice explains almost everything that follows. Early exchanges often begin with the lead hands touching, pinning, and brushing. Those little contacts seem trivial in real time, but they interfere with the opponent's jab rhythm and delay clean counters by fractions that matter. A jab meets his lead hand, gets redirected just enough, and the center line opens for his right. Because David Benavidez stays balanced through that first action, the second and third punches are ready without a full reset. Inside range, where the violence gets attention, his mechanics are still surprisingly tidy. He is not simply falling into the pocket and winging wide shots. More often, he steps into a measured outside lane on the lead foot side, keeps his head placement disciplined, and rotates compactly so both hands remain loaded. From there, he can dig short uppercuts, bend hooks around the guard, and fire straights before the defender rebuilds posture. If a rival shells tightly with elbows tucked, Benavidez keeps scoring around the frame until the gloves climb. As soon as the guard rises, he redirects downstairs. Once the torso compresses, he drives back up the middle with hard, uncomplicated straight punches. That cycle is not chaos. It is attrition through forced decisions, where every defensive answer creates a new problem a beat later. Critics sometimes describe his pressure as simple forward toughness. The tape shows something stricter than that. He advances in controlled increments, enough to erase rest and space, but not so much that he spills over his front foot and loses structure. Typically, the lead foot claims ground first and the rear foot follows underneath him. That foot order lets David Benavidez punch while moving without surrendering balance or defensive readiness. Opponents who try to circle out rarely get a clean runway. He closes doors with shoulder angle, jab placement, and straight shots to the chest that pin the hips and delay exits. Those chest shots are easy to overlook because they are not glamorous. They are essential because delayed exits keep opponents in the range he wants, close enough for hand fighting and frames, far enough for full straight line transfer. By the middle rounds, the effect often appears in legs before faces. Bounce starts to fade, pivots shorten, counters come less often, and longer stretches unfold with backs near the ropes. That is where David Benavidez becomes especially punishing with combination design. He often begins with linear punches to square the target. Then he shifts to hooks and uppercuts as elbows drift and the shell narrows. Even blocked headshots still tax arms, ribs, and spine. The cumulative load builds minute by minute until defensive choices get slower and more expensive. Late rounds do not always mean reckless all-out rushing from him. He may vary burst rate, but he usually keeps command of geography. He keeps touching, crowding, and forcing labor before contact and after contact. One storm can be survived by a durable fighter. Constant interference with timing, space, and breathing is a different burden. You start seeing distress signals that have little to do with one spectacular punch. Mouth breathing appears sooner, clinches arrive later. Exits require too much motion for too little ground gained. Benavidez reads those signals quickly, and his finishing stretches are often triggered by structural failure more than by one perfect shot. A stance widens, a guard rides too high. Foot rhythm disconnects from shoulder rhythm. He recognizes that systems failure and raises tempo with intent. The sequence may look wild from the crowd's perspective, but the same framework is underneath it. Hand position first, stance discipline second. Layered body-to-head work third. Sustain pressure until options disappear. That is why many David Benavidez fights feel decided before the final ruling is spoken. He is not only inflicting damage, he is quietly removing choices. Perhaps his most underrated trait is not volume itself, but danger management while standing in dangerous space. He can spend long stretches in range without becoming the still target opponents think they see. His torso is always making small negotiations over angle and shoulder position. The pocket never stays fixed for long enough to reward delayed counters. A rival blocks a burst, prepares the return, and the lane is gone because Benavidez already shifted half a step and changed the geometry. Openings often exist against him for a moment. The problem is that those openings expire quickly. After bursts, he does something many pressure fighters skip. He touches first. Sometimes glove to glove, sometimes forearm to bicep, sometimes a short post on the lead shoulder. The objective stays the same, interrupt the restart. That tiny interruption lets David Benavidez choose the next exchange rather than react to it. At the elite level, winning that next choice repeatedly is usually the difference between a close fight and a clear fight. His jab is central to that control. He jabs to score, but more importantly, he jabs to steer. High posture gets a hard jab to the head. Restless feet get a measuring flick that prevents comfortable planting. The instant those feet hesitate, he sends the right hand down the middle, often to chest or solar plexus, to stall hips and tax breath. A fighter with stalled hips does not turn corners cleanly. Without the corner, retreat becomes linear. Linear retreat is where his pressure feels claustrophobic, because dramatic ring cuts are no longer necessary once choices have already narrowed. He keeps advancing in disciplined bites of canvas. Lead foot claims space. Rear foot collects balance. Shoulders remain set to fire without overreach. From far away, it can look ordinary. Inside the ropes, it feels like oxygen leaving slowly. Every backward step now demands defense, posture correction, and pain management at once. David Benavidez also presents a hidden physical bill by making opponents punch from bad rhythm. He hand fights just enough to irritate timing, then leaves a calculated invitation that tempts a counter. If the counter comes, he is prepared to catch it, roll it, absorb it on safer guard, and answer before stance is rebuilt. Partial connects still cost energy. A shot that lands clean costs. A shot that misses after full commitment also costs. He keeps that ledger quietly, round after round. Late in fights, the ledger is visible. Opponents widen their base to survive exchanges. Wide feet, slow exits. Guards lift earlier, exposing body line before impact. Clinches begin from farther out, and long-distance clinches are easier for him to frame off, separate, and punish. Each adjustment solves an immediate threat while deepening long-term breakdown. Benavidez reads that breakdown in real time. A rear heel hovering too long. A shoulder turn that arrives late on counters. Head movement that stops after one slip instead of two. None of that is trivia to him. Those are green lights. His punch selection then tightens with purpose. Straights to pin, hooks to bend the shell. Uppercuts when the guard narrows. Then back to straights as posture rises under stress. There is no search for a miracle shot. It is a repeatable formula applied to a structure already failing. Even during acceleration, his fundamentals mostly hold. Feet arrive under him. Hips stay connected to hands. Eyes keep reading between punches instead of drowning in noise. That is why David Benavidez can finish with both pace and accuracy. He does not abandon form to chase a stoppage. He raises demand while preserving mechanics. The psychological effect can be as severe as the physical one. Plenty of fighters can tolerate pain for short stretches. Far fewer can tolerate the sense that every correct defensive decision leads immediately to another difficult choice. Against Benavidez, a block gets redirected. Movement gets tracked. A clinch gets framed off. A counter gets answered. Over time, that sequence drains conviction as much as it drains lungs. Once conviction dips, feet usually tell the story first. So when people call his late control inevitable, they are describing accumulation rather than mystique. Inside work disrupts timing. Measured pressure removes geography. Body attacks stall exits and posture. Layered combinations turn defense into debt. Then that debt compounds until each breath carries interest. By the time the closing surge arrives, it feels sudden in the arena, but film shows it building for most of the fight. A brief hesitation in an opponent's feet is enough for David Benavidez to punch the chest, not for highlight optics, but to lock hinges that make escape possible. Straight rights and hard jabs through center line force the torso to stiffen. Once rotation is compromised, defense becomes mostly arms and reflex. Arm-only defense is exactly where he thrives because he is already punching in sequences while the opponent is reduced to isolated reactions. You can watch him test that relationship constantly. Show high, touch low, drive through the middle. Then check whether the guard is still synchronized with the legs. If the structure holds, he keeps pressing with patience. If the structure splits, he does not rush blindly. He increases tempo with intent and turns reconnaissance into punishment. One of his most valuable habits appears right after he throws. Many fighters pause emotionally after contact. Benavidez resets mechanically, feet under hips. Balance recovered, eyes level, ready to begin the next exchange before the other man has finished processing the last one. That quiet efficiency keeps his pressure coherent deep into fights, while other volume punchers dissolve into single swings and hopeful surges. His conditioning is excellent, but posture and foot discipline are what preserve that conditioning over long distances. Watch his advances closely, and reckless leaps are rare. He takes disciplined bites of canvas, keeps rear side loaded, and arrives in range without surrendering defensive position. To opponents, that feels suffocating because there is no obvious tactical gift to punish, only shrinking space and fewer clean exits. Inside hand fighting is another place where he hides defense inside offense. When David Benavidez pins, brushes, or occupies a lead hand, he is not merely opening lanes to punch. He is deleting counters before they can fully exist. Fewer return options mean fewer reads required. That reduction gives him calmer eyes and faster decisions in moments that look chaotic from outside the ropes. Against movers, he does not chase the head in straight lines. He chases alignment. He wants his lead shoulder outside theirs, his front foot in the escape lane, and his jab active enough to prevent comfortable level changes. Once that alignment is won, combinations become less about invention and more about confirmation. Middle and late rounds often reveal the attrition he invested early. Opponents widen stance to absorb impact. The wider base buys temporary stability while taxing mobility. He sees it, steps in behind jab or frame, and forces exchanges while the target is planted too heavily to leave cleanly. Now the defender spends energy simply holding position. That is the labor tax David Benavidez has been collecting since the opening bell. His body attack is often praised for force. The deeper point is repeatable placement. He returns to the same channels under elbows and along belt line, not randomly, but like maintenance work on the structural muscles that keep a shell intact. Those muscles rarely fail at once. They leak first. A glove returns a fraction late. An elbow drifts. A chin rises on exhale. He reads those leaks and treats them as cues for structured finishing sequences, rather than reckless knockout hunting. A common pattern follows. Head to body to head, post on the shoulder to interrupt return, re-enter before full recovery. The opponent feels a pause and assumes the exchange ended. Benavidez treats that same pause as a new scoring window. Even clinches fit his architecture. He leans with purpose, nudges an opponent a step, and exits with feet already angled to cut the next path. Neutral moments become positional gains. Nothing is decorative. Every contact either scores, drains, or places him to drain again. That is why late-round surges can look inevitable rather than sudden. They are the visible result of many small wins stacked over time. A corner quietly removed, a jab rhythm interrupted, a pivot denied by a chest shot, a counter delayed by lead hand control. Each moment alone looks minor. Together, they redraw the fight until resistance carries an energy cost the opponent cannot keep paying. At that stage, choices narrow to bad and worse. Stand and absorb. Move and get clipped while moving. Either route feeds the same pressure system. David Benavidez thrives there because fundamentals do not loosen when pace spikes. Shoulders stay compact. Feet stay organized. Punch order stays disciplined even when exchanges sound like brawls. Across opponents and venues, the pattern repeats for the same reason. The violence is real, but on his best nights, it is engineered violence, built on alignment, hand control, body attrition, and relentless positional honesty. When an opponent pauses for even a beat, he does not lunge for the head. He steps into the space, his jab opened, and locks down geography. He is hunting position before highlight. That decision is everything, because the ring never tires, but the man circling it does. Each inch he takes forces the other fighter to pay twice for the same canvas, once with movement and once with energy. By the middle rounds, the bill shows up as heavy legs and slower choices. You can watch him audit that fatigue in sequence. Right hand to chest, hook on the gloves, quick touch upstairs, then another step that steals the exit. If a rival fires back hard, David Benavidez is comfortable shoulder to shoulder, where his punch recovery is shorter and his second and third shots usually arrive first. If return fire never comes, he keeps worrying the same opening until the guard starts to flutter and breathe. People call his inside work busy. That misses the intelligence of arrangement. His short punches are organized to protect his own stance while forcing constant stance repairs from the other side. He bumps with ledge shoulder, threads an arm inside, and punches off contact before separation is complete. Nothing theatrical, nothing reckless. Just legal friction that makes clean reads feel late. Along the ropes, his strongest stretches come from exactly that craft. First, he squares the target with straights. Then he changes altitude and direction. Hook to body, uppercut between gloves, hook curling around ear line. Even blocked shots do labor because they pin frame and vision for what follows. What sounds like nonstop offense is often a patient campaign to deny clean exits. Notice how rarely both of his feet drift forward at once. Lead foot claims ground. Rear foot follows under balance. Chest stays ready to fire again without a dramatic reset. That is pressure without falling over the front knee. It is also why he can throw in volume while defending in layers. Counters arcing over the top can be shaved with a small shoulder turn. Counters down the center meet a lead hand already prepared to catch, smother, or nudge line off course. Even when he absorbs one, he is often answering with two while reclaiming angle and initiative. Late rounds are where this engineering becomes cruel. By then, opponents are not only hurt or winded, they are mentally crowded. Every defensive choice has already been punished by a different follow-up, so hesitation appears before the first punch of the exchange. That tiny pause is oxygen for Benavidez. He reads it and spends it quickly. Guard climbs high, he rips body. Elbows pinch low, he drives right hand through the middle. Feet cross during exit, he accelerates with combinations that start in straight lines and finish in curves, guiding head movement into the next collision. So his finishing stretches can sound wild while remaining structurally predictable. The crowd hears noise. The framework is unchanged. Win hand fight, own lead foot lane. Touch after punching, so restart belongs to him again. Force the opponent to solve multiple threats before answering one. There is a psychological layer here that matters as much as punch totals. David Benavidez applies this pace with a calm face, steady eyes, and controlled breathing. That composure tells a tired opponent that surviving the last storm changed nothing. The message drains hope as efficiently as a clean right hand. A fighter who believes pressure is permanent starts making permanent mistakes. He reaches from too far and gets met. He shells too long and gives away clock and corners. He treats ropes as rest. Benavidez treats that choice as permission to work. Then attrition becomes visible in sequence. Head movement fades from sharp slips into smaller flinches. Legs stop springing toward exits and start bracing for impact. Clinches arrive late, then later, until they turn into desperate grabs that miss. By championship rounds, many opponents are still upright but no longer negotiating on equal terms. They are surviving exchanges. David Benavidez is directing the round. That is the deeper value on his tape. He shows that pressure can be technical, volume can still be selective, and violent inside fighting can be built on balance instead of gamble. The damage is obvious. The architecture producing that damage is easier to miss. He does not need one perfect punch when he can perfect the conditions around every punch. Once those conditions are established, the ending feels less like surprise and more like the final sentence in an argument he began at the opening bell. A small hesitation in the feet, and he turns pause into territory again. He drives right hand into chest and solar plexus, not chasing spectacle, but steering exchange back into his lane. That sternum shot looks simple on replay. It does several jobs at once. It scores! It taxes breathing. It interrupts hip rotation before counters can fully form. The moment rotation slows, return fire loses shape, and that delay is where Benavidez thrives. He re-enters behind structure rather than emotion. That distinction is a major reason his pressure holds late. Elbows stay compact under shoulders. Stance keeps width. Head sits near danger without living on center line. Even in long bursts, there is order in his offense. You can trace a frame around apparent chaos, a repeatable architecture that keeps him from spilling into wasteful clinches. He punctuates combinations with corrections. A small step outside lead foot, a shoulder turn into a post, a quick pin on lead glove before the next straight. Opponents feel suffocation. Technically, it is traffic control at fight speed. David Benavidez is deciding who gets to set feet, who gets to turn, and who must breathe on a bad count. When those answers keep favoring one side, fatigue becomes cognitive as well as physical. Tired minds make expensive decisions. That is when his selection hardens. Against a confident shell, he stays measured and layered. Against a doubtful shell, he punches through it, splitting high hands with straights and left uppercuts before the guard can seal. Many body punchers start downstairs to pull elbows low. He often flips that sequence, punching hard upstairs first so gloves rise, then drilling ribs while the defender still reacts to head danger. That inversion explains why his body work can feel sudden in round 9, even though the trap was set much earlier. Another subtle piece is lead shoulder usage in close quarters. He does not always need to shove or tie up to win inside position. Sometimes he simply occupies space, turning his left side into a moving barrier that steals the counter lane for the opponent's right hand. With that lane crowded, his own right can travel shorter and cleaner. If he already nudged the rival's lead glove offline, the opening becomes wider than it looked in real time. None of these manipulations are flashy alone. Repeated across rounds, they become a compounding tax. By the late rounds, many opponents are no longer trying to win exchanges cleanly. They are trying to survive the pace of decisions David Benavidez keeps forcing. Defensive shortcuts appear. Single-shot exits replace layered exits. Clinches start from too far out. Retreats lose angle. He reads those transitions and adjusts cadence without changing identity. Maybe a slightly longer pause. Then a tight 3-punch line lands because the old rhythm was expected. Guard jumps high to protect head, and he returns to sustained fire at arms and body, making each reset expensive. This is where he separates from volume punchers who fade behind their own output. David Benavidez does not need every shot landing flush for sequence success. Blocked hooks still move gloves and vision. Glancing straights still shift stance and balance. Body shots caught on elbows still bruise frame, breath, and focus. He wins long stretches by forcing unfavorable trades in energy and position, not by gambling on one cinematic ending. If a stoppage arrives, it often feels inevitable rather than sudden. Base widens. Torso rises with each breath. Jab returns slower to guard. Pivots decay into straight retreats near ropes. At that stage, he is not guessing. He is reading a system failing in layers, then raising demand until failure is obvious to everyone. That is why his best performances feel less like a takeover and more like controlled demolition. Damage is visible. The deeper story is structural. He takes rhythm first, then spacing, then exits, and only after those pieces are gone does he take the fight itself. Inside hand control starts the collapse. Stance pressure sustains it. Late round attrition completes it. Across all phases, David Benavidez keeps command of the same question. Who acts first? Who resets second? Who is condemned to react until the bell is no longer rescue?